Elyon, mi melech malachei hamlachim akadosh baruch hu. Boachem l'shalom malachei hashalom malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Barchuni l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim akadosh baruch hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Welcome and Shabbat Shalom to everybody. For those who do not know me, my name is Joshua Garraway, and I am not the rabbi of the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. I am but a congregant. And I believe at the moment we don't actually have a rabbi. Our previous rabbi has departed, and our new rabbi will be arriving, I think, on Wednesday. So this is the last of several Shabbatot in a row in which folks from the congregation are helping out with leading the service and other such things. So it's been a thrill to be here a couple times in the last month, but I also look forward to our new arrival, who, by the way, I went to high school with. I did. Yes, so that was Shalom Aleichem on page 13. We will continue the Kabbalat Shabbat service on page 15 with Lechuna Ranana. But first, we need to acknowledge that the candles have been lit previously. I think we could actually light them now at this point in the summer, but they've been lit previously, so I need a volunteer to come up and lead us in the candle blessing. I was going to ask for once she got up, the prettiest lady in the congregation. But I couldn't do that once it wasn't her. Not that I don't think that's not true, but there's issues of propriety. Amen. Shabbat Shalom again. We'll continue on page 15 with the first of the 6 Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, preceding Lecha Dodi. Lechuna ranena ladonai, naria letzur yishenu, nikad mafanav betoda, Bizmirod narialo. We continue with the box on the bottom of page 15. Arba'im shana akut bedor, va'omar am toelevavhem, vehem lo yadu dirachai, asher nishbati ve'api im yavo'un, El Menuchati, page 16. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru Miyom LeYom Yeshuato, Sapru Vagoyim Kivodo, Bechol Ha'amim. Niflotav ki gadol Adonai umulal meod norahu al kol Elohim yailai lai ki kol Elohei ha'amim elilim va'adonai shamayim asa hod vehadar lefanav Oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho havu l'Adonai mishpachot ha'amim havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz havu l'Adonai kivod shemo se'u mincha Uvo lechatzrotav yailai ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh chilu mipanav kol haaretz imru vagoyim Adonai melech adof tikon tevel bal ti'imot yadin amim b'meisharim yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz Yiramayam Umelo Yalo Sadai Vechol Asher Bo Yailayas Yiranenu Kolat Seyar Lifnei Adonai Kiva Kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel betzedek ve'amim be'emunato yai lai Page 17. Adonai malach tagel haaretz yismechu im rabim anan v'arfel sevivav tzedek u'mishpat mechon kiso. The bottom of page 17. Or zaru ala tzadik ul yishrei lev simcha simchu tzadikim b'Adonai v'hodu lezecher kodsho. Page 18. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash ki niflaot asa hoshia lo. Yeminos roa godsho. Lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel betzedek ve'amim b'meisharim. Page 19. Adonai malach yirgezu amim yoshev kruvim tanu taretz. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. And now we will continue with the particular prayer for Kabbalat Shabbat, Lecha Dodi, which can be found on page 21. And I don't think I see any beginners here, but please remember that in the final stanza, we will rise and face the entrance. What should we do here? How about Lecha Dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad Hishmi'anu el hamyuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shem u'tiferet ve'litila Lecha Dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki hi mekor habracha Merosh mikadem nesucha sof maaseh b'machshavat chila lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzei mitoch hafecha rav lach shevet be'emek habacha vehu yachamo alayichem la Lecha Dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Yitnari me'afar kumi Leave she bigdei fartechami al yad ben Yishai beit halachmi korva el nafshi ge'ala lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, kiva orech kumi uri, 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 shir daberi, kivod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 nekabela. Lo tevoshi velo tikalmi ma tishtochachi umatemi Bach yechesu aniye ami v'nivneta ir al tila lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalai yalalai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela v'hayu limshisa shoasaych v'rachaku kol mevalayich yasisalayich Elohayich kimsos chatan al kala Lecha dodi likrat kala yailalai 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela Lecha dodi likrat kala yailalai 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela Yaminu smol tifrotzi Et Adonai taritzi Al Yarish ben Partzi Venismecha venagila Lecha dodi likrat kalai Yailalai 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela Lecha dodi likrat kalai Yailalai 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala gam besimcha uv'tohola tochem u'ne'am segula boi chala lecha dodi likrat kala yailalai 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela lecha dodi likrat kala yailalai 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 Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Please be seated. And we will continue with the final psalm of Kabbalat Shabbat, the special psalm for the Sabbath day, on page 23. Let's do Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tov Lehodot LaAdonai Ulezamer Leshimcha Elyon Ulezamer Leshimcha Elyon Lehagid Baboker Chastecha Ve'emunatcha Balelot Ale asor valena velale gayon bechinor Mizmor shir leyom hashabat tov lehodot la Adonai ulezamer leshimcha elyon ulezamer leshimcha elyon Ki simachtani Adonai befo alecha B'maaseh yadecha aranen Magadlu masecha Adonai Me'od amku machshevotecha Mizmor shir leyom hashabat Tov lehodot la Adonai Ulezamer leshimcha elyon Ulezamer leshimcha elyon. Continue on the bottom of page 23. Tzadikata mar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yiske shetuli beveit Adonai Bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu Od yenuvun beseva Deshenim vera'ananim yiyu lehagid Ki Yashar Adonai tsuri, tsuri, velo avlatabo. And we will continue eventually with the Mariv service on page 28. But first, it is my pleasure and responsibility to offer a bit of teaching. For those of you who have been here on Friday nights when I am in charge, I don't give sermons, I don't talk about the Torah portion. I do the traditional activity of studying the laws of Shabbat. So we did all of Mishnah Shabbat chapter 2 last year, because that's in the Siddur, in the pages we just skipped. And then 2 weeks ago, we did Mishnah Shabbat chapter 7, Mishnah 2, where we talked about the 39 forms of prohibited labor on Shabbat. Today, I want to skip way ahead in the Mishnah to Mishnah Shabbat chapter 19. And Mishnah Shabbat chapter 19 has a somewhat unusual subject, given that it is in the laws of Shabbat. The subject, as you'll see momentarily, is the issue of circumcision. It's an entire chapter in the laws of Shabbat about circumcision. In 5 or 10 minutes, I hope you will understand why. But I'm going to read very briefly the Mishnah, which I wrote out longhand, and I'm getting old and can't see. But I think it says, Katan nimol lishmona letish'a ula asara ula chadasar v'lishnemasar lo pachot v'lo yoter, which means something like this. A young boy is circumcised on the 8th day, the 9th day, the 10th day, the 11th day, or the 12th day. Never any more and never any less. That's the law. I'm going to suggest there's actually a lot in there that might actually be relevant for today. But first, let's figure out what's going on with this suggestion that there are actually 5 possibilities for the day on which you circumcise a young boy. First, please keep in mind we're only talking here about a healthy young boy. A boy who is infirm and not prepared for circumcision is not circumcised until he is healthy enough to undergo that procedure, even if that means he is never healthy at any point in his life. Hemophiliacs, which they determined to be hemophiliac if 2 older brothers died when they were circumcised, then you were deemed to be a hemophiliac, and you were actually never expected to be circumcised in your life. So here we're just talking about boys who had a high enough APGAR score, I think that's the terminology. They're ready to go when circumcision comes upon them. So the question is then, why on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th day? So let's start with the easiest one. Why would anyone be required to circumcise their son on the 8th day of life? Professor Henriksen, Garraway. What's that? Because in Genesis 17, I wrote down here verse 12, which is the story of Abraham marking the covenant through circumcision. After he circumcises himself at the age of 90 or whatever it is, God says, from here on out, the mark of this covenant is that you will circumcise boys at 8 days old. Well, that's a pretty good reason for doing it on the 8th day. That's the law. Circumcision of boys on the 8th day. So if a boy is born on Tuesday, the following Tuesday, the bris. If a boy is born on Thursday, the following Thursday, the 8th day, a bris. Question: if a boy is born on Saturday, a week later on the 8th day, Shabbat, do you have a bris? Well, no, because it's the 8th day of life, so it's always the same day that you were born. For certain. So if you're born on Saturday, your bris would be the next Saturday, and do you have it? Yes, because the rabbis say that the circumcision on the 8th day supersedes the Sabbath. So even though on the Sabbath You would be required for a circumcision to, say, wield a knife and draw blood and do things you're not allowed to do on the Sabbath. Because it is an eighth-day circumcision, it is permitted. Now, you have to do all the preparations that would require you to violate Shabbat on the previous day. You have to, if you need a fire in order to sharpen the instrument or or travel, these sorts of things would have to be done on the Friday before. But on the eighth day, if it is the Sabbath, you can perform, indeed you must perform, the bris. Okay, well that's easy. But then why would you ever be expected to have a bris on the ninth day? That's why you might have it on the 11th or 12th day. We'll get there. But why would you ever have a bris on the ninth day? Well, the rabbi said that if you're a child who is born, say, right about now, but not on Friday night. In other words, you're born right at twilight. And it's not clear, were you born on, let's say, Tuesday evening, or like Tuesday afternoon, or the next day, Tuesday evening. Right? It's not clear whether you were born on one day or the next day. Well, in that case, the rabbis say, God forbid you were actually born before sundown, and you were born after sundown, and we circumcise you as though you were born before sundown, the boy would be circumcised on the seventh day. So, if you were born at twilight, you were always circumcised as though you were born after the sun had gone down. But in some cases, there will be a boy who's born before sundown, technically, but we reckon him as though he was born after sundown. So he's actually circumcised on what is the ninth day of his life, and that's the way it ought to be. So for a boy born at twilight, he will possibly be circumcised on the ninth day. Why might it end up being the 10th day? Well, let's say right now there is a little boy being born. He's born at twilight, so we have to assume that he's born after sundown, right? So in that case, his bris would be next Shabbat. But because we're not certain that next Shabbat is the 8th day, it might actually be the 9th day. You can only violate the Shabbat to circumcise a boy if it is certainly the 8th day. So if it might be the 9th day, then you wait and circumcise after Shabbat on the 10th day. So a boy who is born on, say, Friday afternoon at 6:30 will not be circumcised, and that's actually Friday, will not be circumcised on Saturday, which would be the 9th day, but actually on Sunday, which would be the 10th day. So how could you ever be born on the 11th day, circumcised on the 11th day? Yeah.
So, as our lovely friend in Oxford learned from the London rabbi, when the 8th day was Shabbat and ran into Pesach, if you don't want the Moel living with you for 3 days, the Moel can decide in London that the baby in Oxford is a little jaundiced. And therefore, you can postpone the circumcision until the Moel can travel.
Yes, you're not only allowed to postpone the circumcision, you must postpone. So, if the baby is born Friday at twilight, you would say, well, we circumcise on Saturday, which could possibly be the 9th day. But we don't do that. We wait till Sunday, which is the 10th day, because the 9th day was Shabbat. But what if the 10th day is the first day of Pesach, or the first day of Shavuot, or the first day of Sukkot, and we're in the land of Israel? So there's only one day of the holiday. Well, then you wouldn't circumcise on the 10th day. You would wait until the next day, which is the 11th day. And of course, if you are in the diaspora, or you are in the land of Israel, and the festival is Rosh Hashanah, then you would be waiting not till the 8th day, the 9th day, the 10th day, or the 11th day, but the 12th day. So depending on how the calendar falls, the commandment to perform the bris is usually on the 8th day, but it can be on the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, or the 12th day. very few people will ever have to concern themselves with this law. Nowadays, most people have 2.8 children, which means 1.4 of them are likely to be a boy. Chances are that 1.4 boys will be circumcised on the 8th day like normal. The chances of them being born at twilight on Friday night before a Shabbat, which is incredibly small. So what might we learn from a Mishnah like this? Here's why I think it's important. It's a quintessential example in the rabbinic legal system of how there can be a series of values, all of which are taken seriously, but at some point in time, they compete with one another. Two things that we value have to happen at the same time. We can't do them both. So on Shabbat, we value not working, not wielding a knife, not drawing blood. But circumcision on the 8th day is so important. And the rabbis say it's so important because the point of Shabbat, for example, is maintaining the covenant with God. But the bris is what establishes the covenant with God. So the Sabbath is dependent on the bris. So 8th day circumcision is the number one priority. Then Shabbat, then festivals, then circumcision that's not 8th day. But no one would say that circumcision not on the 8th day isn't important, or that observance of the festivals or observance of the Shabbat isn't important. It's just that in the prioritization, the hierarchy of values, circumcision on the 8th day is the top. Now, let's imagine that we're reading the Talmud and this law is being discussed. Do you think it's possible that someone might come along and say, well, wait a minute. In my reckoning, the Sabbath is actually more important than circumcision on the 8th day, and therefore we should always delay circumcision if it's on the 8th day to the 9th day. Can you imagine that coming up? Yes. And how do you think that person is treated in the Talmud? By and large, people that bring those kinds of objections are treated kindly. They're ultimately proven wrong, but they're treated kindly. Oh, Rabbi so-and-so, that's an interesting problem that you raise. But here's why we think we should prioritize 8th day circumcision over Shabbat and not Shabbat over 8th day circumcision. This happens time and time again in rabbinic literature, where all of the rabbis agree on the basic principles and the basic values, but what's being discussed is how to prioritize them so you can have a system of law and ethics in which you know what to do. The reason I wanted to mention this tonight, and I'm not going to go more than a minute or two longer because I'm about to talk about politics, and I'm going to keep it short. This week was a very interesting week in which a number of Supreme Court cases came down. And I go on social media, and it seems that if you think affirmative action is a bad idea, I can talk politics because you can fire me tomorrow. You're a horrible racist. And if you think that affirmative action is a good idea, then the court is illegitimate and everybody who disagrees with you, the people who, sorry, I got a little confused there. The people who don't support affirmative action are racist. The people who do support affirmative action are communists, fascists who want the government to control your life. I can't be the only one that has seen this all over my feed in the last 2 days. At a different Supreme Court case, it's the same kind of binary division. And yet it seems to me that most people I know in my life have as a value that individuals should be treated fairly before the law, that no individual should be denied a certain opportunity on account of their race. At the same time, most people I know, not everybody, but most people I know say, yes, it's also a value to recognize that America has not always been the friendliest place for people of color, for Native Americans, and so on, and that it might not be a bad idea for the government to take proactive measures to try to overcome centuries of inequality. Both sides, as far as I understand it, have those as values. It's more a matter of who decides to prioritize one over the other versus the other over the one. And yet, when we talk about these afterwards, we seem to forget that oftentimes we are talking about people with shared priorities and shared values, and we render one side the side we don't like, as if they are demonic or evil or immoral, and that's by and large not the case. And I want to summarize all of that and conclude that by noting a statistic I just saw on Twitter before I came to synagogue tonight, which is that in the overwhelming majority of Supreme Court cases that were ruled on in the past judicial season, I think the majority, more than 50%, were 9-0 decisions. In other words, the court by and large agrees. These are the principles, this is the Constitution, this is how America works. Easy case. The hard cases are precisely hard because there are competing values that everyone agrees on, and yet those competing values are clashing, and we have to make a decision on which one takes priority. That's what the rabbis did day and night in the Mishnah and the Talmud, and this Mishnah from Shabbat 19 on circumcision vis-a-vis the 8th day, vis-a-vis the Shabbat, is a perfect example. Shabbat Shalom. We will continue with Ma'ariv on page 28. Please rise. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed. Continue on the bottom of page 28 at the box in the Hebrew. Ma'avir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamidim lo chaleinu leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. Please be seated. I've noticed in this congregation we often remain standing for Ma'ariv Aravim, when I always thought it was traditional to sit immediately after Baruch Hu for both the Ma'ariv Aravim and for Ahavat Olam, but it doesn't really matter. Page 29. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amchavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shochveinu v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla. Ve'ahavadcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael. Page 30. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta abam B'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'aderech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Continue on the top of page 31. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem ve'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei vigdeihem ledorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf petil techelet v'haya alachem letzitzit Uri'item oto, uzchartem et kol mitzvot Adonai vasitem otam, velo taturu acharei levavchem ve'acharei nechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'hitem kedoshim lelohechem, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem lelohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem. And we continue with the Geulah prayer, the prayer praising God for redemption, past, present, and future, with Mi Chamocha on the middle to bottom of page 32. Mi Chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Nora tehilot, Oh, sefele, malchutecha ra'uvanecha, boker yam lifnei Moshe, ze'eli anu v'yamru, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar, ki fada Adonai Yaakov, u'ga'alo miyad chazak mimenu, baruch atah Adonai, gal Yisrael. And we will continue on page 33 with our one English prayer for the evening. We'll say together Hashkivenu on the left side of the page. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again, our sovereign, to life. Spread over us your shelter of peace. Guide us with your good counsel. Save us because of your mercy. Shield us from enemies and pestilence, from starvation, sword, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, O God, who watches over us and delivers us, our gracious and merciful ruler. Guard our coming and our going. Grant us life and peace now and always. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Praised are you, Adonai, who spreads the shelter of peace over us, over all his people Israel, and over Jerusalem. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 34. V'shameru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz uvayom hashvi'i shavat vayinafash. Yitkadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah v'yamad yivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael bagala uvizman kariv v'imeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ulal me'almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da amir an bi'alma v'imeru amen. We continue now individually on page 35A or 35B with the silent recitation of the Amidah. I'd like to do what we did 2 weeks ago, which is when we come back to recite the Me'ain Sheva standing. So I'll alert you to what page that's on when we reconvene. Page 35A, 35B. As I think I mentioned last time, on the Shabbat Mariv service, the rabbis decreed that the silent Amidah would not be followed by a full recitation of the Amidah by the Shaliach Tzibur, the person in the front of the room proclaiming the prayers, because that would take a while, and people were in a hurry to get home after a long week of work and enjoy a Shabbat meal. So they came up with a shortened version of the recitation of the Amidah, a sort of digest, and that is on page 47. So we will continue on page 47. Please rise. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam vayechalohim b'yom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbot b'yom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayekadesh oto kivo shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Konei Shamayim v'Aaretz Magen Avot Bidvaro Mechaye Metim b'Mamaro Ha'el HaKadosh she'ein kamohu Hamendiach le'amo b'yom Shabbat kodsho Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem Lefanav navod b'yirav afachad V'nodeh lishmo b'chol yom tamid Me'on ha'brachot El hahodaot Adon hashalom Mekadesh hashabat umvarech shevi Umeniach bikdusha La'amedu shnei oneg Zecher Zecher L'maaseh v'reshit Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu ritzei v'imnuchatenu Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tein chalkenu b'toratecha Sabenu mituvecha v'samchenu b'shuatecha v'taher libenu le'ovdecha be'emet v'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu B'ahava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'anuchu v'Yisrael Mekadshe shemecha Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh hashabbat Yikadav Yikadash Shemei Rabbah B'yomad Yivrachute B'yomlich Malchute B'chayechon V'yomechon V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agalau V'yisman Kariv V'imeru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'alam Ulal Me'al Maya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitalav V'yitalav Shemei Dekudesha Brichu Le'ila Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Da'amiran Be'alma V'imeru Amen. Titkabal tzlotonu va'oton Dechol Yisrael Kodem avuhon Divi Shemai V'imeru Yehi Shlama Rabin Shemai V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imeru Osei Shalom Imrav Hu Yasei Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imeru Amen. Osei Shalom Bimromav Hu Yasei Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imeru Amen. And since we are standing and we skip Kiddush because we do it after Tefillah, let us go right to Aleinu L'Shabeach on page 51. Aleinu L'Shabeach La'adon HaKol Lateit Gedula Liotzer Bereshit Shelo Asanu Kegoyei Ha'aratzot Velo Samanu Kamishbechot Ha'adama Shelo Sam Chalkenu Kahem V'goralenu Kechol Hamonam Va'anachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, V'ne'emar Adar, v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad. Ushemo, Ushemo echad. Please be seated. In love, we remember those who no longer walk this earth. We are grateful to God for the gift of their lives, for the joys we shared, and for the cherished memories that never fade. May God grant those who mourn the strength to see beyond their sorrow, sustaining them despite their grief. May the faith that binds us to our loved ones be a continuing source of comfort as we invite those who mourn and those observing yahrzeit to praise God's name with the words of Kaddish. And before we ask mourners to rise, we recall the members of the PJTC community whose yahrzeits we are observing this week, and they include, and I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations, Harry Edelstone, Michelle Angel, Leon Benveniste, Michael Berry, Stella Rose Breyer, Erwin M. Brown, Minnie Cohen, Samuel Alexander Davis, Rose Freund, Roxy Holland Moritz, Jack Candle, Stephen Kay, Benjamin M. Kleckner, Charles Collin, Edith Lichterman, David Mark, Nathaniel Miller, Bessie Miller, Mary Priester, Jose Procupez, Peter Richman, Sarah Bessie Roth, Edward Schwam, Marlene Chayet Siegel, Florence Faye Siegel, Murray Siegel, Oscar Stern, Naomi Weinstein, Leon Weissman, Rose Weiss, Martin Zalanka, and Louis Zyman. If I have mispronounced a name and you know its correct pronunciation, please offer that now. Or if you have a name to offer in your own life for whom you are observing yahrzeit, please feel free to offer that name. Okay, then I will ask mourners to rise as we recite Kaddish Yatom on page 52. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who causes peace in the high heavens cause peace to descend on us, on all Israel, and on all the world, and let us say, Amen. Are there any announcements? Are announcements going up there? Apparently there's a sisterhood meeting Monday evening on Erev Yom Ha'atzma'ut. On Yom Ha'atzma'ut, that's Independence Day. The offices are closed, nothing on Wednesday. Exploring Your Life Through Torah on Thursday. Oh, there it is. I think that's with Rabbi Mann. And then the big event next Friday, the first Shabbat services led by Rabbi Ben Goldstein, in person and online. Wonderful. So, are there any other announcements that anyone would like to share with the community at this time? All right, well, I normally conclude the service with Yigdal, but I was moved by my own words earlier. and it renewed in me a love for this great country. Plus, it is the weekend before our Independence Day, and I noticed that on page 396 in the back of your Siddur, there is not only America the Beautiful, there is America the Beautiful with the two lesser known paragraphs, the second and third. So I would humbly ask that you join me in America the Beautiful on page 396. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for pilgrims' feet, whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom beat across the wilderness. America, America, God send tikkun olam, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed God's grace on thee, and crown thy good with siblinghood from sea to shining sea. Shabbat Shalom. The Tikkun Olam thing, that was just spur of the moment. Can we unmute? Oh. I hate the lounge act thing. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam vayechal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbot b'yom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayekadesh oto kivo shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot savri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit Ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'acharta v'yotanu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha b'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. What can you do? Make them kiss. You gotta hold them together. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz.